Welcome. My name is Caroline Colas, and I am the Senior Director of Health and Wellness at the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan. Today, we are joined on our Lunch and Learn call, a program in partnership with the Whole Being Institute, with Claudia Aronowitz. And today we're going to be talking about the art and science of thriving in relationships. Science tells us that strong connections are essential in order for humans to thrive, feel fulfilled, and to find joy. But the connections we make with others are only as strong as our communication skills. In this program, we'll learn how to thrive in relationships using equitable communication tools and techniques. Once we understand the science behind why our minds actually make things up, we can start to see things from another person's perspective and learn clear strategies on how to reduce conflict and strengthen our connection with others. Claudia is a personal development and relationships coach and mediator who uses compassion, insight, and straightforward communication to support her clients through change and transition. Her ability to translate scientific, proven research into practical tools, as well as to clarify complex situations and break them down into accessible steps helps her clients create the life and relationships that they most desire. And she's certified with both the International Coach Federation and Coaches Training Institute, holds a certificate in positive psychology from Whole Being, and is also trained in organizational relationship systems coaching. She's spent over the last 20 years as a leader in the health and non-for-profit sectors, and she's an engaging strategic thinker who, prior to becoming a coach, was a mediator. Right? Are you still doing mediation now, Claudia? Welcome.
I am. I still do mediations, although I like more working on relationships one-on-one, but I do work with groups and couples.
Awesome. And where are you calling in from?
So I'm calling in from Toronto, Canada.
Wow.
And I was just telling Caroline that it's a great day here and that actually they just closed the restaurants and the gyms for us. So that it was like a shock of that, a little bit of going back to March, a little bit, the feeling for us this past week.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I know that.
Yes.
We were talking about being shut in and also feeling like being stuck with people, even if we love them. So today, I think this call is going to be particularly relevant. Feel free, everybody, to wave your hand if you've had challenges in your relationships, either because you don't see people enough, right? I just had a phone call with 3 of my best buddies last night. I just called them and I said, can anyone please get on Zoom? I just miss you all so much. I can't stand it anymore. And the temptation to kind of, not responsibly, but the temptation, I say, to sort of throw away, cast to the winds. Should I go see somebody? Should I go, and yet we really need to be careful during this time.
I was going to say, I'll wave my hand. If you have problems in your relationships, I can start.
Yeah, for sure. So relationships, how did you get engaged or involved with the Whole Being Institute? And was your final project on relationships? I'm curious.
It actually was. So I got involved because you were talking first about cancer. So I had cancer 10 years ago. And after being home 2 years, it was time when I had to go back that it was really an opportunity to say, so what now? And what do I want to do? And somehow I got involved in coaching and loved the studies, but I was missing the scientific background because I come from science. And I think what Whole Being Institute and the certificate in positive intelligence gave me was all that background to understand why in coaching we do the tools that we do. And I just found it fascinating. And I found it fascinating that there's so many things we can do that are in our control to make our life better. Because I think life is challenging. By definition, life brings change and it's challenging. And we don't have control so many of the times, and especially now as an example. But there's things that we have control. So I really hold on to that part that we have in our control. And then I'm fascinated by just human interactions and relationships. That's been all my life. I love connecting to people in a deeper level. I love getting to know other people and other cultures. I've moved around in my life to different countries, so that has also been part of it. And then the connection of understanding, so why are relationships also fast and so important but complicated? And are there things in our control that we can help to make them better? I think that is my passion. What are the things that I have in my control that can help my relationships, and by definition, whatever relationships you want to call it, my intimate relationships, my family relationships, my friends, my colleagues. At the end, it's two people that come together and have to communicate and have to have a relationship that becomes important to you. And what is in my power to really create those relationships in a way that they work for me. And that is where my passion comes.
Beautiful. And I think what I understand from working with people who are living with cancer or in treatment for cancer is that can become a defining moment to really look at time and decide, how do I want to spend my time, and what is most important to me. And we've had several speakers on the call talk about lessons from hospice even, and one of the things has been relationships and connection. So there's also this relationship that we have with our body, right?
And with ourselves, yes.
Yeah, with ourselves. So I'm really looking forward to your presentation. Should we jump right in? Do you want to share your screen? And we'll talk about science first.
But before I go there, so I'm going to start just with a small story because I think it helps you to identify where I come from. So I actually grew up in Mexico City. I moved to Israel for 15 years, and then I've been in Canada for the past 12. And my husband is on the call, but I've told him I will not follow him to any other country in the world. I'm done starting over. But since that special youth, I've always been really intrigued by relationships. And I come from one side of a family with a lot of divorces and broken marriages, but I come from one side of the family where for 4 generations, there hasn't been any divorces. And I've always been intrigued, what is the different? And what was told here that maybe I should understand, because they never said anything, but I'm imagining something was being passed from one generation to the other. So I like to tell the story. My grandmother used to give you the rings from her parents. This is 4 generations up, so that you would use it in the chuppah when you went in, and then you had to give them to her immediately after you left. And she's many years gone, but the rings are still being passed to the younger generations. So we like to joke that the rings were magic. Of course, it's not the rings. And I think I finally got it to what it is there that we were taught that has been so helpful in our relationships as we move forward. And I hope that by the end of the talk, you'll get them and I'll put them all together for you. But what I'm going to be talking about relationships, to me, relationships is any human interaction that is important to you between you and somebody else. Some of us need a lot of relationships and they have large groups of people. Others need few people in their lives. It doesn't matter how many we need or what type they are or with whom they are. But as positive psychology will teach us, one of the things we need to have a happier and more fulfilled life is the relationships with those close to us. We really can't do life alone. We need other people in our lives. And the idea of this talk is I hope I can give you some tools that you can decide, oh, so if I change this or if I do those small changes, it can create a bigger change. Because I really believe that if one side changes, the other side gets it and starts changing again. What I'm not going to be talking about are abusive relationships. Where there's abuse, either harassment at work or abusive relationships in the personal aspect, that is not where these skills come in. There are some relationships in our lives that the best solution for them in a positive way is just to get out of there as fast as we can. So those are not the type of relationships I'm talking about. I'm not an expert on abuse or harassment I'm talking about the normal relationships that instead of just being normal or being angry or with resentment or just not really being able to thrive in them, how can we revive them? How can we create positivity and thrive, even with conflict in it, but to really make us feel that we have somebody next to us? That is what I'll be talking about. And please interrupt, put things in your chat. Caroline is going to be looking for questions. I love being asked questions in the middle of it, and I'll be happy to answer. This is really for you so that you get of it as much as possible. And sometimes, questions and conversations can really help others to relate more to what I'm talking. I tend to talk really fast, and if I do, please let me know. Just go like this and I'll slow down. It's just, I get nervous, I talk fast. So if there is something that is not clear, just let me know. Okay, saying that, I'll go and share my screen. Love technology. Wait, share screen. Oops. Okay. So the art of science of thriving in relationships. So the first thing that I'm going to ask from you is I want you to choose one relationship. Think about a relationship in your life, friend, family, partner, child, colleague, somebody that the relationship is keeping you awake at night. A relationship that needs a little bit of shift. You know, I'm going like this with my hands. That needs a little bit of something different because something there is stuck. It's not quite working, or you just want to make it better, or you just want to think about it a little bit more. So that as I talk and walk you through it, you can start thinking specifically, oh, this is what I will do in that specific relationship. Okay, oops. Okay. And then we're going to go through two things. I'm just going to give you like 10 minutes of the scientific background, a little bit to understand what happens when we have conversations with two people. And then I'm just going to walk you through 5 things that I chose that from my experience of the many years I've been working with people in relationships can really help change the relationship, where the emphasis is these are things in our control. Because of course we can change a relationship if I have the 2 people in front of me or the family in front of me or the colleagues in front of me and we work all together. But a lot of times I have things in my control that can help change the relationship. And today is only about things that are in your control. Okay, this comes from Judy Glaser. She was actually from New York and she created a fantastic book and program called Conversational Intelligence. And sadly, she's no longer with us. But she could spend the whole hour just talking about this slide. And this slide is very complicated, so I'm gonna go really fast. But I wanted to keep it there because what I wanna show you with it is that conversations, words, create feelings in us, emotions, and the emotions create different hormones to be secreted in our body, different parts of our brains to be used, and it's like a whole experience. Words can really change how our whole body and mind is feeling. When I'm having a conversation and my hands start sweating and my heart starts palpitating, it's real. Those changes are real in my body. Some conversations and some words can put me in a place where oxytocin is being secreted, where I can really share and I feel trust and I feel open and I can be myself. And other conversations can do exactly the opposite, and cortisol is going to be secreted in my body. And I start using another part of my brain, the back part of my brain, and I can't really think rationally. And I get triggered and I just want to protect myself. And I put like a wall, and it's so unconscious, and it happens to all of us. So there are biological reactions that we need to be aware that they're happening to know when I can really have a good conversation and when I can't. So when people say, you know, we start screaming at each other, you're already in the back part of your brain using cortisol. Time to stop the conversation because nothing good is going to happen about that conversation. You cannot share and listen when you're in that part of your brain. The other one, and I love this slide because this is true. We make things up. You and I and everybody else makes our own conclusions. It's not so much, you know how many times I have 2 people that say, but that's not even what happened in the meeting. Or I sit in a mediation and one party tells me the story and I go, oh, I get it completely. And I sit with the next party and they tell me the story and I say, oh, I get it completely. The only thing I don't get is how are they speaking about the same event? Because here is what happens. We're having a conversation. We're having a meeting with somebody else. And our biological reactions start taking place. All these hormones and my heart beating and all these things are happening that make me feel either insecure or safe, or that I can trust you, or they bring so many things back to me that help me remember of all these past times where I felt that way. So my beliefs come into place, and then I assume half of the things they're saying, and I interpret the interpretation comes in a different way, and the meaning that I give to it is different. So the parts of that I remember about the conversation are very specific. And at the end, if you have 5 people in front of you, they will remember and have a feeling and a conclusion about the conversation that can be very different. Because actually conversations have a very objective part of what happened and what was said, but they have a subjective part. And the truth becomes a mixture of both. And this is like an aha moment for me and for a lot of people that I explain it to. Because if you can understand that I am adding all these filters to what you're saying, and you are adding other filters, then there's a lot we need to do, because what you're hearing and what I'm saying, and then the other way around, is very different. We actually make stuff up. So here is a question for you. What two people are having a conversations? What can happen when they're having them? What type of feelings come up? If you can put them in the chat. You know, it can be happiness, and it can be joy, it can be conflict. What comes to your mind when you're having a conversation with the person that you were thinking about? Connection, fantastic. Thank you very much. So there's connection that's going there around there. Here are some of the things that happen, okay? There can be disagreement, there can be conflict and anger and frustration and sadness, but there can also be fulfillment and communication and growth. Yeah.
We're getting some connection. They are staring hard at me. Why? Be careful. Confrontation, active listening. I can have judgments, biases, my own agenda, frustration.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, everyone that was writing there. And here is where I try to show you. Relationships and connections have both. Just by definition, just like, you know, I'm sure you've had talks about being human and how important it is to accept that we have good feelings and bad feelings, and we have parts of ourselves that we love and parts of ourselves that we don't like. Relationships and communication between more than two or more people have both. They are the source of fulfillment and happiness and opportunity and growth and feeling good about ourselves, but they can also bring, if they're not dealt with, a lot of frustration and anger and sadness and resentment and even loss of the relationship. So how do we get more of the fulfillment, happiness part of it? And how do we deal with that disagreement whenever it's going to happen? And that's where we're going to go into. Any questions so far? Okay, going to keep on going. So I chose these 5 things to talk about because I really believe that they're simple to implement if you're aware of them, and that they can really change how you feel in your relationships, how you react, and what happens in the relationship. So I'm going to talk about clarity, listening, assumptions, perspective, and nonverbal communication. So this is probably the most important one. And when I talk about clarity, I'm talking about 2 different parts of clarity. The first part of clarity is I first need to know myself. I need to know what I need. I need to know what's important to me. I need to be able, because if I don't have clarity with myself in my relationship with me, there is no way I can have clarity and have the other person know. And I remember this client, and she was talking about her relationship with her husband. And she said, well, I want my husband to see me more and show me more empathy. And I asked her, okay, so what behaviors would he have to do that would make you feel more seen, that he's showing you more empathy? And she said, I don't know. Well, if you don't know what behaviors would make you feel that way, how is he supposed to know? And that's where our conversation went. Because if we don't know what we need, the other person, there's absolutely no way that they can know. So the first thing that we need to do is let's start getting to know yourselves. If you haven't, do the work. Know what are your strengths? What are your values? What are your trigger points in those relationships? Because sometimes if we are aware that we're going to be triggered, we're not as triggered anymore. What do you need from that person so that you can ask them about it? Because if we know ourselves, then we can really move forward. And I love this quote. One must first learn to say the word I, because self-esteem is the disposition to experience oneself as competent to cope with the basic challenges of life and as worthy of happiness. And I really like the word about the worthy of happiness, because we will not get love and respect and whatever you want from others if we don't give it to ourselves first. If we don't think we're important enough to give it to ourselves, why will people around us give it to us? So the first relationship and the first clarity is really with us. And this is my favorite quote of all. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can change, and the wisdom to know the difference. Because I need to know that there are things I can change about me, that I cannot change about me, that I cannot change about the other person, and that I cannot change about the relationship. And there are things that I can. And the important thing is to start differentiating between the difference and to start focusing on those things that I have control over. And until we know what we want to say and what we need, it's only then that we can get our message across. So, you know what? Oops, sorry. Before I go, sorry, something I want to go back. Oops. No. Okay. I want to give you an example also about external clarity. And I'm going to give you an example of me and my mom 23 years ago. So I was living in Israel at that time, and I had my first child. I had a very difficult birth, and my mom came to be with me for a month. It was really tough. My husband was traveling, and I was feeling bad, and she really had to take care of me. And I wasn't being grateful, and I wasn't being nice to her probably. And after 2 weeks, she said, I've had enough, and went back to Mexico. When she came back 2 years later for the birth of my second child, we actually had a 5-minute conversation that went like this. Look, Mom, if you're here this time, it's not about our relationship and you, it's about me and helping me. So you can know, when you're in my house, please just help. But if you need to get out of the house and go see a friend and take the day off and go for a walk and go see a movie or do anything because you're tired, also do it. That's fantastic. But when you're in my home, what I need from you this trip is to really just be there to help me. It was fantastic. We had the most amazing relationship because I was able to clarify what I needed from her, and she was able to clarify that she was too tired and she needed time for herself. And then it really worked well. So with internal clarity, start asking yourself, is whatever happening important to me? What are the values that I want to honor? How do I want to show up? What do I need the other person to understand? And when you are saying what you need to be very specific. Okay, the example with my mom, I need to let my mother know that when she was there in my house at that trip, she needed to take care of me. I needed her with cooking, with cleaning, with this. I really needed her help. If it's important to you, verify that the other person understood. Remember my first slide, we make things up and it has a lot of filters. If you really want them to understand, ask them, so what did you understand? You know, did you get what I wanted to say? Because a lot of times, I will assure you, they did not. And more clarity needs to take into place. And if you're talking about something that really bothers you, talk about the problem and the behavior, not generalizing. It's not, oh, you're always this, and you're never that, and you with always and never. It's about, I need you to do this very specifically now. You know, if I want my husband to take out the garbage, and I say, can you take out the garbage? And then he doesn't. And then I'm so mad and I just explode. And he doesn't even understand what happened because I never said, can you please take the garbage out now before we sit down for dinner? Because if not, I don't feel like, you know, everything's clean and I can't enjoy dinner. Oh, sure, no problem. But before I just said, take out the garbage, not when. Why did he have to know it was now? It seems stupid, but small things, being clear, are so important. Any questions? No. Okay. I can't see your faces, so I hope this is being interesting. Let's go to active listening. How many of you consider yourselves really good listeners? That in that relationship that you're thinking of, you're a good listener. Just say yes, no. More or less, love that. Okay, more or less is also the third word. Yes, no, more and less. Here is the thing about active listening. It is hard. To really listen to the other person, it's hard work. I remember, years ago when I started doing this work, And I suddenly started paying attention how many times to my kids they would be saying something and I would be going, no idea what they're talking about. But yeah. And I was thinking about something else. Oh, Caroline is laughing. See, I challenge you to pay attention after today. How many times you're actually just nodding your head or saying something, but you're not actually listening. Active listening means that with all your senses and all your attention, you're paying attention to what the other person is saying. That means all of you, okay? And there's different levels of listening. So when I have a client in front of me, they're in level 1. They're not really supposed to be listening. They're supposed to sort of listen to me and then be completely absorbed in their own thinking because it's about them. Most of us spend most of our conversations in level 2, which means you say something and I start thinking how I'm going to solve the problem, or what am I going to say back, or what am I going to respond. So I'm sort of listening because I'm paying attention, but I'm really paying much more attention of what is going to be my answer and what am I going to tell you and what are you not getting right. The third level is when I'm actually just there waiting for you to say something. When I put on, I like to call it my curious hat, and I really want to be surprised about what I'm going to learn because I assume I have no idea of what you are saying. And I write a blog about all these topics and why, what you can do to actively listen more, which I invite you to subscribe. So I'm really just there listening to the person. And level 4 is what us, like a coach is trying to do, which is I also even pay attention to what is not being said, to the tone of voice, to the silence, to what is not being said that also has a lot of information. But really listening is hard. So here is the thing. If you think that you can really listen to someone and multitask, you're wrong. Our brains are not capable of multitasking and really listening to somebody else. I can sort of listen and be hearing something else or being a Zoom call and be answering emails. That's not really listening for what a relationship needs. We are not able to multitask. So the first thing you need to do to really listen to someone is put that phone away. Stop multitasking. Really show the person in front of you that you're hearing them. Because I have found that if there's one thing that all human beings need is to be heard and to be seen. We really need that. And if you can give the present of being heard and seen to somebody else, you are giving them a real present in life. The second one is say less, ask more questions. It doesn't help the other person when they tell me something and we start saying, oh yes, but for me too. And what they really happened is, and they start, adding all these things. We're not listening. Ask questions and then wait. Give 30 seconds of silence. Those 30 seconds that permit for the person to think what they want to tell us, you will get so much more information out of it. I do this with my kids. I have teenagers and young adults as children. And if you ask a question and you let silence come, you get really rich information. Ask questions that you need to get an answer for. This is also a lot for colleague type of relationships. Ask questions that start with who, where, when, what, so that the person has to express more of that. Show the person that you're listening to them and just paraphrase back. So what you're trying to tell me is this. Let me make sure I understood you. This is what you wanted me to say? Oh, what a present for the other side to know that you're really listening to them. And then, as I said, put that curious hat on and be willing to be surprised and to know that you actually don't have all the information you need. Listen to understand and not on how you will respond. If you really listen to the other person, their reactions will change. And you will learn so much that you did not know before. Okay, questions? I'm going to keep on going.
Claudia, what I was thinking is, isn't it true also that the way that we speak is at a certain speed and the way that we think is at another speed? So we really do have to wait because our brain will fill in.
We have to slow down.
Yeah.
We have to slow down. And, it's the concept also from positive psychology that says, sometimes what we need to do is do less and not more. It's the same thing in communication. It's not about how I feel the silence and how much more I can say. but what question can I ask? And how good can I just be quiet and listen?
Beautiful.
Okay. My third one, and I think I found this in the internet, and I don't think I need to say much more than what is there. If you are assuming, stop. If you find yourself saying, oh, but they should know, or how is it that they don't know if they know me so well? If it's important to you, don't assume they know, because most probably they don't. You don't know how many times I've asked the question. So if I had the other person in front of me and I asked them the same question, will they know your answers? And the answer is no, they don't. So if it's important to you, make sure the other side knows, and don't assume that they know, because it's not true. I'm going to give you an example of some work I did with some nurses in a doctor's office. So these were 4 nurses, and they were about to lose their jobs. This is how much they were fighting between them. When actually all that was happening is that the different nurses were assuming that the behavior of the other nurse meant that they didn't respect them and that they didn't want to include them. So the example was, one nurse was already there, and the other nurse would pass by and wouldn't even say good morning. No respect there. While the other nurse that wouldn't even say good morning actually wanted to respect the other one so much, and they didn't want to disturb her, so she just let her work. It's all based on assumptions. These women were about to lose their job, and what we finally came out to, they were just misinterpretations of small behaviors that were making them assume that one didn't like the other, or that something was happening there, when the 4 of them loved their jobs and wanted to keep their jobs and work together. So don't assume, because that really doesn't work. If you need help in the house, ask for it. How is the other person supposed to know that what you want them to do is whatever it is? They don't. We really, really need to ask. Also, don't assume that what is important to me is important to the other person, okay? I love my birthday. It's like, I love being the queen of the day. My husband could care less about his birthday. For 10 years, I would make a big fuss about his birthday and he could care less, so he wasn't very grateful. And he didn't do a lot of things for mine because he could care less, and I would get mad. Until we were finally clear as like, this is what I'm expecting. I just turned 15 last year, and I remember saying very clearly, you better make it a special day, because this is what I'm expecting. I'm expecting a special day. It's important to me. So you better go have that for me. I don't make an effort for his birthday anymore because he doesn't get it. He doesn't care about it. But for 10 years, we assumed we were being nice to each other when we were just assuming. So don't assume, and clarify if you were understood the way you wanted to be understood. The last one, I'm going to use pictures from the internet just to show you again how things can be seen from 2 very different points of view, and it really depends where you're standing. I love this picture. Is the man looking to the side or is he looking to the front? It just depends what you're paying attention to. Amazing artwork. How about this one? Depends where you are. You can be so happy to see a boat, or you can be so happy to see a land. It really depends where you're standing. I love doing the one of the 6 with my clients, which is just putting a 6 in a piece of paper, because we can argue for ages that you see a 6 and I see a 9. And you know what? We're both right. You see a 6 and I see a 9, and we're both absolutely right, completely right. But it's just because until we're willing to see each other's perspectives and point of view and see it from the side and say, oh, it can be a 6 or a 9, or it actually can be just a circle with a little thing on top, then we have a conversation. If you stack in your point of view and your perspective, then there's no movement. And you need to start understanding that from the other side, it can look very different. The other one is just for this joke. How about this one? I love the one of 4 and 3. I don't know how they do this graphically, but it's amazing because it actually looks like 4 and it actually looks like 3. And from both sides, it's a complete truth. There's no argument about it. It's a 4 and it's a 3. And we need to understand that depends what we're putting attention to, how we see it and where we're standing from. The actual reality feels different and it's understood in a different way. The other one I love, you can see, a cup or just the two faces. And look at this one. How about that? Isn't that amazing? I just found that in the internet. I give total credit to the person that did that. But it's amazing to show you that if I'm willing to move around, I can see it in another way. And if what I'm looking for is to find connection with the other person or the group of people or my family or my friends or my community, I need to be willing to move away from my position, move away from my perspective and try to see what are they seeing differently. So here is your tool. When you're in disagreement with someone or something you can't get at what they're seeing it, try to walk in the other person's shoes. Try to understand, so if I was to be that person, why are they seeing it that way? What could they be seeing? Remember that the truth is a mixture of an objective circumstance, but a subjective component. And then use the I statements, what I like to call I statements. If you start a conversation by saying, I really need this. The way I understand it is this. What anything that starts with me, what I need, what I am feeling is this. When you do that, I feel this. The other person doesn't have to go into a protective mode, using the back part of their brain and having to feel that they need to respond and take care of themselves and stop listening. By using I statements and trying to see it from another point of view, I let the guard of the other person come down so that we can have a better conversation. When we start conversations with you do this and you do that, by instinct, we're going to protect ourselves because that's our instinct. We need to protect ourselves. We need to feel safe. And if we don't, then we put up a wall and we start telling you why we need this to feel safe. But if you start sharing how you feel and how I am seeing it and the way I need it, oh, that's a different conversation. I don't feel attacked. I can have that conversation. Yes, how are we feeling so far? Yes? Okay, I can't see everybody, but I hope there's thumbs up. And then this is the last one where I'm not going to go into detail, but there's a lot of things in nonverbal communication that we need to start paying attention to. Because sometimes, I'll help people that say, oh, no, I'm okay. And their arms are crossed like this, and they're like this, and they're rolling their eyes. Or, no, I'm paying attention, and they're looking all the way to the other side. Our bodies say a lot. So even if you're not saying it in words, you are communicating. Your tone of voice says a lot. I can call excitement, I can show anger just in my tone of voice. And now if you add the modern technology, oh my goodness, should it have been 5 exclamation marks in my message or 10 or how I read it? I remember I had a difficult conversation with a colleague not so long ago. And then she sent me an email and I immediately added all my emotions about that difficult conversation. And I thought, she's being so aggressive. I'm gonna answer back. And then I took a step back. And I went to my husband and I said, isn't she being aggressive? And he read the email and said, nope, she's just clarifying some things and asking for something. And then I took 24 hours before I responded. So if you get a message from someone and it triggers you, don't answer, wait. Wait and see what is the emotional part that you're adding to that text or email or written communication before you answer. Because it may not be the way you're perceiving it. It may be something else, but we already say something. So be very careful with written communication. Be very careful with your tone of voice, with your physical environment. That is also part of communication. And the last one, conflict and disagreement are part of the healthiest of relationships. If we don't have conflict and disagreement, there's something wrong with the relationship. Remember, we're two very different individuals, and more if it's a group or more people, with different values, perspectives, backgrounds, needs. And when you put those together, there's bound to be disagreement. It just has to happen. Conflict and disagreements can be fantastic. They can help us grow in the relationship. They can help us learn. I had a client that I worked with her one-on-one, and she had a lot of difficult conversations with her kids during the summer, like really hard ones. But she was able to cry and she was able to say what she needed, and she had to hear some really hard things. Her relationship is completely in a different place because she could finally understand what her kids wanted from her, and her kids could finally understand what she needed, and she understood who she needed to be. And that wouldn't have happened if she wasn't willing to deal with conflict and disagreement. Conflict and disagreement are uncomfortable by nature. They're difficult. When I say I love them, it's not that I love them. I think they're just important, but they are uncomfortable. Having those difficult conversations is hard. It's uncomfortable. It's full of emotions, but avoiding them just makes it worse. So I'm not saying about every conflict and disagreement have all these incredible conversations, because a lot of them I just need to let them go. I just need to shake them off and say, forget it, not important, keep on going. But for those that are really important to you and that keep you up at night, or day later you keep on thinking about them, you need to learn, and I'm happy to come back and give another talk about how to deal with conflict. We need to learn how to deal with conflict and disagreement in a positive way, because throwing it under the rug is not a solution. It will come back. It's like a snowball, something small. I have families with siblings that can't even remember why they stopped talking to each other. It was something small that could have been done easily, something about it, but because it was left undone, it got out of hand. Okay, I did a bar mitzvah for my kids some years ago, and I forgot to give an aliyah to my sister-in-law. I really forgot, okay? 3 years later, in a conversation around the table with all my siblings, she says, and do you remember that you didn't do this 3 years ago? I got so mad at my brother. Why didn't you tell me that day? That day I could have said, I'm sorry, given her something else, apologized. 3 years later, I don't even remember what I did or I didn't do. And she had kept that anger for 3 years. If we had talked and talked about it that moment, a solution could have been found. I had no idea what she was talking about, and she kept it for 3 years. I really got mad at my brother. Why didn't you have the confidence just to come and tell me? I could have done something about it. So don't be scared. And because we're in positive psychology, I'm just going to leave you with one message about conflict. You've probably seen this many times. This is from Barbara Fredrickson. I love the positivity ratio, where it says about in our lives, the ratio of how happy we are is between good moments and difficult moments. Both are going to happen, but depends how many good moments against bad ones I have that makes me feel happier. I think it's the same in relationships. Bad interactions are going to keep on happening. Conflict is going to keep on happening. So I invite you in those relationships you've been thinking about, make sure that you bring some moments of happiness, that you say good morning in a nice way, that you call them and tell them why you appreciate them, that you do something that will help you have more good interactions, because it only takes adding a little good interactions to shift this ratio of how our relationships feel. So don't take it for granted. Small actions, and you have absolute control over this, to show an appreciation, to do something together that you enjoy, can really change the way you feel in your relationships. So here is a summary. You have things to do in clarity and listening. Do not assume. Perspectives are nonverbal. Remember that there are things that are in your control. And what is it that you can change? If there's something that you really want the other side to understand about your relationship, make sure you explain it and take the time for them to know it. I'm going to give you here another example of another client. They've been fighting with her partner for quite a while, until the partner finally said, one of the things that bothers me the most is when I wake up in the morning and I tell you I had a really bad night, you'd immediately go and say, oh, wait till you hear the bad night that I had. Or I tell you, my leg is hurting, and you start saying, well, my leg hurts even more. Can you, at least for the time when I'm complaining, give me 5 minutes of just me complaining? And then you can complain, but let me feel that I'm heard. Give me that empathy of 5 minutes of letting me be heard, that I need to complain. It's not that I don't want to know that it also hurts to you, but not at the same time. And that was clarity of the message. And now they laugh about it. Oh, it's your turn. Right. But it was very hard for them to be able to articulate, what I need is some empathy, not for you to tell me that you're also feeling, because that makes me feel like my feelings are not important. So if there's something that triggers you, understand what is it? And is it something you need the other side to know, or is it something you need to change with you? What do you need from the other side? And don't forget that positive things in our relationships bring more positivity, bring more happiness. Small things, you know, saying I love you to someone, giving a virtual hug, calling someone, asking someone how they're doing can really, really make a difference. This is what I learned from my family after thinking about it for years, about the rings of my family that I started the conversation. This is what I think was taught in my family without being said. We knew that relationships take ongoing work. The married and happily ever after is a fairy tale that doesn't exist. Every single relationship that's worth having takes ongoing work. But not putting in the work takes even more energy because the frustration and the anger and the resentment takes a lot of emotional time. So put in the work in the relationships that are important to you. Our relationships change and need adaptation. Because you change, I change, our world changes, our circumstances changes, and what was working for us a year ago, it's not working for us anymore. And we need to constantly be adapting in our lives and in our relationships. Conflict and disagreement are a healthy part of relationships. They're great. Don't be sad about it. You know, when I talk to a young couple and they say, oh, we never fight, oh, that's a red flag. That means they're not being authentic. That means that there's something there that they're not saying. I don't say yell and hit each other. I mean, have an argument. You know, disagree on something. That's part of a healthy relationship. And the last one is, we all play a role in the relationships we have. I like to say, you know, we all have 100% of responsibility. It's not even 50-50. Is if I take my 100%, and you take your 100%, and the other people take the responsibility, we can really change the relationships we have. How about this one? Not mine. I took it from somebody else in the internet. I don't know who wrote it, but I think it's fantastic. If you miss somebody, by all things, call them. You want to meet up with someone? Invite them to a Zoom call, because that's what we can do now. You want to be understood? Make sure you're explaining yourself. You have questions, you're not sure? Ask. You don't like something? Say it. Here's an important one. You like something? State it. Make sure you're always grateful and you say thank you and you say what you appreciate and why. You want something? Ask for it. And you've lost someone or appreciate someone? Make sure you tell them. So I'm going to open it up for questions. You are going to get a link to these two resources that put everything together, what I have talked about, the 5 things we talked about today. And then I created this little thing like cheat sheet so that you remember some of the things we talked about and have them in your refrigerator to guide you as you move forward. And I would love to be in touch with you guys. I have a Facebook group and an Instagram, and I have a blog, and I love writing on the topic of relationships and positive psychology, relationship with us and others. And I really invite you to be in touch with me and ask me more questions. And maybe, Caroline, we want to open it up for questions, comments.
I have quite a few for you.
Well, you didn't interrupt me, so I just kept it going.
No, I didn't want to. You know, I was practicing my listening. But what I wanted to talk about was the assumptions. Mm-hmm. And is there a way that we can identify that we're assuming? It's kind of natural for the brain to assume, isn't it? It's one of the ways that we sort of, make things easier so that we can go on to other things. So if we have that, if we know that our brain sort of naturally does that, what are some of the things that we can say that, oh yeah, I'm assuming that, not just, oh, I assumed that, you know what I mean? Are there things that were catchphrases or things that we can think and that we can be aware of? So here a few things come to mind. If you're assuming small things, by all means, I'm not talking about this has to be in all our conversations. You know, some of our conversations have to be fun and we have to joke around. That's why I put myself with a smiley face, because, you know, fun and jokes and making fun of ourselves and the relationships are part of life and a part of relationships. So for the small things, it doesn't really matter. But if you find yourself saying, how is it that they don't know? Oh, come on, they should know by now. Can't be that they haven't gotten it. You're assuming. If those are the thoughts that come into your mind,
You're assuming, and the other person probably has no clue that you're feeling that way. So that would be one. And the other one would probably be if there's something that repeats itself and it's triggering for you over and over and over again, there is a mixture of misunderstanding and assumptions going on. And it's time to understand, why do I get triggered? Let me give you I have a friend that always says the word obvious. What do you mean obvious? If I ask you a question, it's because it's not obvious. And it triggers me. It really triggers me until I finally understood it wasn't only with me. That's her way of saying, of course. She just uses the word obvious instead of course. And now every time she says obvious, I just go, of course. It doesn't trigger me anymore. I was assuming something, if that's an example that can be used.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. I think that is really helpful. Also, I think we're talking about vulnerability too. In conversation, if we're going to both ask for what we need and not assume, there's going to be an expectation that that person might say, well, you know what, I actually can't do that. Right? I can't
Absolutely
be there for you every single moment, or call you 3 times a day, or do you know what I mean? And then there's, what do we do in that situation? Because then we're going to have to figure out, if we still have that need, how we're going to get that from other people or fulfill that need ourselves.
So I heard 2 questions. So one is about vulnerability. You probably all know about Brené Brown. I love her work because I actually think that being vulnerable with the right people, I'm not saying with everybody open up and be vulnerable, of course not, but with the people that are important to you, it shows that you're willing to put yourself there. And that means that you are going to be able to show up, and it's important. But the other one is, when you ask for something, by all means, you may get the answer of no, but at least you know where you stand. I remember a client that we prepared for a conversation with her boss, and she came back and said, he said no to all my asks. And I went, fantastic conversation. And she looked at me like, you're crazy. What do you mean fantastic conversation? I said, well, at least you have your answers. You know where you stand. You know what you can get from them, and you know what you were not going to get. And now it's up to you to decide what is your choice. But if you're just assuming they're going to say yes when the answer is still going to be no, that puts you even in a more vulnerable place of getting even more upset. So expect no's. Yes, when you ask, you will get no. It's okay. It's actually, I wrote a blog about why no is actually welcomed and even more important, because it liberates me. At least I know where I am, and it's important.
Beautiful.
Any other questions?
Yeah. You were talking about how conflict is normal in every relationship. And it also, going back to the brain, it reminds me of how it sort of warms up our brain, the limbic brain, the limbic system, right? We actually need that kind of interaction or that conflict, that rubbing together in a way to slow down the neocortex, or to get out of the basic brain, don't we? So that we can connect and we can feel one another. Is there a use for conflict in that way? Is that what you're talking about?
Oh
The
my goodness.
warming?
There's a use for conflict and disagreement in 100 different ways. The first one is, it is there. It's going to happen. Because if we're different people, there is no way we can always connect perfectly. Now, I'm not talking that we should have relationships where we're throwing things at each other and we're yelling at each other. We can do conflict and disagreement in a very respectful way. We can do conflict and disagreement conversations that I like to call essential conversations in a very safe way. We just need to know how to do them. Because if you're actually dealing with conflict and it's starting to yell, that's not even a conversation anymore. That's when we need to call a timeout and please, we'll continue later. Let's take a bio break. Let's breathe in. That doesn't work. Conflict brings up opportunities of learning things about others, ourselves, and our relationship that unless we have those difficult conversations, they don't come up. Because unless I'm willing to tell the other, the example of my client, I really need you not to say anything when I need to complain. Give me a little bit of empathy here. That would have never happened. She didn't even know she was doing it. It was so automatic. It just came out of her. It really triggered the other person. Don't be afraid to say what you need. If you're willing not to get it, if you're willing to say it in a good way, and if you're willing for the other side to also ask things from you. You know, I had a client that came to me and said, I have my daughter-in-law coming in to live with me in my house for a week. And if it goes like last time, this is going to be the end of our relationship. And I talked to her and said, why? And she said, because she never says thank you to the things I do. Then I leave myself all the week open and they make their own plans and I stay without anything to do. And when she understood, wait, so don't do or buy anything, you're not doing it for yourself. Do it because you want to have it. And if they don't say thank you, you don't care because you did it for you. And the second one, have you ever walked to her and said, can you let me know what you're doing today? Because if it's not going to be with us together, I would like to make plans for myself. And she said, no. She called me a week later and said, you just changed my relationship with her. Because finally there was a conversation that I also have limits and that I'm also willing to do. And I also count in the relationship. And she had never thought about it. That was conflict that was dealt in a positive way in a short little conversation. It doesn't always have to be big. I don't know if I answered your question. I may
Yes,
have
you
derailed
did.
a
And
little
I
bit.
think you're talking about authenticity,
Yes.
right? And the importance of that. And that's a very big component of positive psychology is can we be authentic? Number one, listening to ourselves. I love what you said about relationships changing on an ongoing basis. Even our relationship with ourselves. As a health and wellness expert, I'll say to people, listen, the workout that you did when you were 20 is not going to be the same one that you do when you are 30 or 40 or 50 or 60. It maybe even every day, it's going to be different. How you do it, why you do it. And what I hear you saying is that really what we want to be doing is engaging in
Oh, I
the
love that.
process of
Yes.
clarifying, engaging in the process of listening, engaging in how we assume, right? Engaging in perspectives and that there's different perspectives, and engaging in being aware of the ways that we communicate non-verbally, right? And having that not be something that we arrive at, right? But that we sort of discover as we go.
I love it. I'm going to change and I'm going to add for my next presentation the word engaging. I think you explained it beautifully. What I'm asking you is not to be scared of it, but to engage in these differences and to engage and decide that I have more control over them and I can do something about it in all the different areas because I can engage with it because I don't have to be scared of it. So thank you. I love that. Engaging in conflict and disagreement and all the others. Beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, it's been really wonderful and informative to spend time with you. Claudia, I thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining our calls every week on Tuesday and Thursday. Next week, Dr. Sherry is going to be talking more about the brain and technology. And on Thursday, we're really going to dive in deep into gratitude and how gratitude can not only is it the foundation of all virtues, but it can actually foster what you're talking about in relationships, both when we get triggered and we're in the back part of our brain and it's time for a timeout and we're not quite sure if we're having a discussion or an argument or an escalating to a place where we need to stop, and what role gratitude can play in that situation. So please stay tuned. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Claudia. Any last words that you want to say?
Just, you know, as we are in COVID right now and relationships are harder, they're harder because we're away from some and very close contact for a long time with others. Be kinder to yourself. Be kinder to the other person. We both need a little more empathy than normal. We need a little more understanding than normal because sometimes it's just hard. And we are allowed to say, you know what? It's not about you, it's about me today and I'm having a hard time, and that is okay also. Because, you know, the world is complicated outside today and we really need that empathy for us and the person in front of us. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. We'll see you next week. Take care.